Hi, I'm Jack Baruzzini, and you're listening to The Secrets of Stargate, where we talk about the hidden meanings and deeper layers found in the Stargate movies, TV series, and more. And joining me today are Father Cory Sticha. Hi, Father.
Howdy, Jack.
And Victor Lambs. Hey, Victor.
Hey, Jack.
Before we get into this episode, I'd like to remind everyone that we have an awesome merch store at sqpn.com/merch. You can get our beautiful faces on mugs or stickers or t-shirts. And I think we've mentioned this before, but we all wish we looked as in shape as our characters do on those shirts. So I guess that's a goal for us.
You know what has to be said is we can get our mugs on a mug.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
There we go.
Or get these guns on a shirt, I guess. Yeah.
That works too, yeah. So you can head on over to sqpn.com/merch and check that out. Today we are discussing the 7th episode of Season 5, Beast of Burden. Shaka, When the Walls Fell. Oh, wrong show. When Shaka, the Unas that Daniel befriended, is captured by slave traders, SG-1 attempts to free him, only to discover an entire community of enslaved Unas. Jack and Daniel are captured and learn that all the Unas, not just Shaka, are capable of intelligence. Teal'c and Sam help Shaka and the other Unas escape, along with Daniel and Jack. But the Unas decide to stay rather than departing through the Stargate so that they can free their brethren. And that's pretty much everything that happened in that episode.
Yeah. And thus, the great Unas War has begun. These Unas Wars have.
Yes. I had to resist the urge just to Shaka every time I said his name. So,
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on this episode, Father?
You know, it's not that bad. I don't think, anyways. It's obviously a parallel to human slavery and things like that, and racism and all that. But it wasn't that bad. It was just there wasn't a lot going on.
Yeah. It was very, very thin on plot, but I don't feel like it took advantage of that to do a lot of character building. Like there wasn't a lot of character moments in this episode, so it just felt odd to me. What about you, Victor?
Yeah, there's a lot to like in this episode. The guest performance we have as Unas as Dion Johnstown, reprising as Rose as Chaka, and then Alex Zahara as Shy One, who's in the barn with him. What was very interesting about this episode is that if it was made today, you do have the parallels to slavery. Certainly, the most direct comparison is in American history, but really slavery anywhere. It would have been like no question the characters would have come in like, we must raise this civilization to the ground for their crimes, and it's actually a lot more nuanced than that. Mm-hmm. And I think the reason it's nuanced for that is due to the fact that the show, and this is one I think that doesn't work for the show, is the show can't really decide whether at the beginning and then throughout the episode if the Unas are sentient life forms and therefore have rights and stuff, and or not. They have established previously in the previous episode with Shaka that Shaka is intelligent and understands language and can learn and stuff. And it's not clear, they say, well, these Unas here are inbred and they're no more than beasts. But at the same time, I mean, they seem, at points, Daniel seems surprised that like Shaka is reasoning or using language as well, so they can't really figure out, the writers can't really figure out, are the Unas intelligent or not? And so it creates this kind of dichotomy where you come in and you say, well, of course they are, they should all be freed. But, Jack's dragging his heels. Even Daniel at some point is trying to figure it out. And so it does kind of break the episode a little bit there, but there are a lot of really nice touches and things going on in the background that I think do work really well. And of course, our very special guest star here,
Larry Drake.
Yeah, Larry Drake. But yeah, he obviously is a very good bad guy in this, just as he was in Darkman a few years earlier. So Sam Raimi's Darkman.
Oh yeah, I recognized him. He's in an episode of Firefly, and I think that's where I recognized him.
Yeah, Firefly episode of Voyager. He was one of those actors. Sadly, he's since passed away. Who was in a lot of things. I mean, he was always kind of a guest star of this or guest star of that. He really was never like a central actor. But he's a face you recognize. He's one of those people
Yeah.
that you just recognize from all kinds of shows.
And I really liked his performance because he's not just a one-note villain. I mean, he kind of is, slavery is wrong and he doesn't recognize it. But from his perspective, the backstory is that the Goa'uld had occupied their planet, generations ago and used the Unas to enslave the humans. The Goa'uld left. At some point, there was an uprising against the Unas, and the humans turned it around and enslaved the Unas. Two wrongs don't make a right, but three do, I guess. And and so there's that's his perspective. But he's not just immediately like killing Jack and Daniel. He's reasoning that they can help bring more Unas to replenish the gene pool there and stuff. So there is some nuance to his performance, but he's quite obviously a bad guy.
Yes. Yeah, I was not a big fan of this episode. I got to be honest. I think mostly because it felt so just kind of slapped together and thin, and had all the concepts in it were just they were rushed and not really fleshed out at all. Like you said about they really waffle back and forth on the Unas, and then there's I feel like there's no real progression of either plot or character in this episode. It's like they get to the planet to rescue him, and then they're in prison, and then they get out, and then the episode's over. Like there didn't seem to be any forward momentum.
The arc isn't there. There's a lot of good character moments. Daniel, of course, has, we have to save them. Let's try honesty as the best policy, right? When they first land there, what are we going to tell these people? Yeah, let's try honesty. And within a, half a second, Daniel is coming across as, oh, we're traitors too from a far off land. And, Jack even goes like, what happened to honesty? But, there's a feeling with Jack that he's, being pulled into this, against his will. There's maybe they have, special technology here that he's kind of interested in, but he gets pulled into it. But, the more he's kind of abused by the the villagers and by the head trader, the more he kind of comes around. Then there's that very interesting scene where after they've tried to free the Unas, and Jack has given orders not to shoot to kill any of the humans, but a human's been injured. One of the people on the planet has been injured, and this boy just comes in and says you're the man who hurt my father. Stealing is wrong. And then leaves, and the performance is just so good on that, and it doesn't really fit in with the rest of the episode, but Jack's big moment, I think, is when he has to realize that they're not getting out of there without maybe hurting some people.
Yeah. Right. And I really I thought that was the best scene because it showed that they that skewed moral view that these people had, where they were more worried about property being stolen because they viewed the Unas as property rather than you're enslaving someone and also indiscriminately torturing and killing these people.
Well, and there was irony too, where then later Burke comes in and talks about, stealing one of our Unases is a death penalty, or stealing leads to death. And it's kind of like, okay, well, you're the one who stole Shaka, so are you gonna can we kill you? It's that kind of thing. And I did like that where he figured out the gun. Of course, you got that scene where he just mows down the Unas.
That was surprising.
Empty. Yeah,
surprisingly jarring for a 90s television show. I felt like.
Yeah.
Well,
I think
But I mean, it was, and then you see kind of the darkness in Jack where he goes, how do you reload this? Give it to me and I'll show you. Basically you give it to me and you won't be walking out of this barn.
Yeah, and that's where Larry Drake is just very good in that scene. He's like, no matter. I figured out how to shoot it. I will figure out the reloading too. He already knows that the magazines are the key and stuff. So not your general your generic backwoods person with a weird hat who doesn't understand the ways of technology. He's smart, but he has a moral compass. Everybody on that planet does, but it's very, very skewed and very wrong. And so I think that's what makes them interesting as enemies. At least to me, they could have done a lot more with that. But
I think that's really the weakness of this episode is that it was just very rushed. Like this, if they were going to do this, it should have been a two-parter because it not only do you not really get a feel for the people in the village other than the head trader, it sets up a bunch of pretty dark implications towards the end where when after they've rescued the Unas and they're going to go through the gate, the Unas decide to stay to free the rest of them, and then SG-1's kind of just leaving them in the lurch. And then also, there's probably innocent people in that village who are going to be collateral damage due to this fight.
Oh,
So
definitely. Even though Daniel says, well, we taught them there's another way. They don't have to kill right after the guy's just point blank shot Burrick, not 100 times, but blam, blam.
Yeah, that was not a cliched line that didn't fit there. It's pretty clear that the Unases were going to go back and basically destroy the village.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, you reap what you sow, I suppose. But there was. At
least Daniel did admit that they weren't going to get out of there without hurting someone. So I mean, there was that.
Yeah. The scene where they actually break free, and so Teal'c and Sam have been kind of sidelined this episode. They've been running through the forest, checking out the gate, coming back in radio contact, and then they're going to free Jack and Daniel, who are chained up in the barn. And they have a pretty good plan where they're going to they light the barn, basically the hay on the barn on fire, or a hay thing next to one of the houses in the village.
Hay cart,
yeah. And then Teal'c's going to blow up the water. And so as this escape is happening, the men of the village are out chasing down, the people who are shooting at him, which is Teal'c and Sam at that point. And all through the escape scene, you see the women of the village like running with buckets of water in the background and, very frantically, running with water to put out the fire and stuff. And so I thought that scene and that, there's a lot of really interesting, camera movement. And, as the action is happening in the foreground with the main characters, there's always somebody running back and forth in the background with a bucket of water, and so I thought that was, very effective for an action scene. It took it up one notch beyond just, oh, let's watch SG-1 shoot at people who are shooting at them type things.
Well, I was kind of surprised as they were leaving the barn that there wasn't that they're getting away, that kind of, there's always got that that one old guy, they're getting away, get him, Marshall, that kind of deal.
Yeah. I don't know. It really, honestly, it really bothered me the way they resolved this episode, which is that they didn't. And it felt out of character for SG-1 to be so callous that they're just like, oh, well, there's going to be a lot of people who die here as a result of us coming in. And yes, it's good to free the Unas and it was good to rescue Shaka, but they didn't really make the situation better.
Well, I mean, they have a way to end slavery on the planet. I guess that's better. I mean, if you look at what happened to the other in the other side, right? That's the one with Rene Auberjonois and the underground space Nazis.
Yeah.
They basically, once they found out what was going on there, they didn't actively wipe out that planet, but they, didn't allow them to continue. And basically, I wouldn't say they murdered Odo because we've discussed that in the past, right? So, but certainly they had a chance to save him, and they didn't. I think having that sort of, if they had done that hook again here, like, ooh, there might be ancient technology buried here, so we have to make friends with these people. It would have covered a lot of the same ground. It would have made the episode more interesting, but it would have just been a rehash of the other side. But I mean, so they've done it before where they basically doomed a civilization that, didn't live up to their, moral code.
Right.
So, and basically, I mean, they have Chaka there. I mean, who's to say Chaka, wouldn't have eventually led a slave rebellion on his own, right? Probably
That's
he wouldn't
true,
have, but
yeah.
Well, he probably would have been figured to be too wild and killed anyways.
Yeah.
Right. Because even the way they left him, like, it's not clear cut that the Unas are actually going to get free. Like, they're just like, you 5 guys can go try to rescue the rest of them now.
It was 2 of them, I thought.
Was it just 2?
Because there were 3 of them that were that escaped from the
big
jail,
guy,
and one of them was killed.
It was like,
oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah. So it was just Shaka and Shy One.
Right. Yeah. So it doesn't seem like great odds for them. I feel like, because at no point were Sam and Teal'c not able to get to the gate.
No, they,
Well,
no,
'cause
it
they
was
went
it
ba-
was guarded.
Oh,
yeah,
I
there's
thought they
the
went
one
back
scene
and-
where there was about a dozen people standing in front of the gate.
Oh yeah, that's right. Just feel like there could have
Because that
been
was the
some
initial
sort of-
plan, was just to have them
Right.
go through the gate and get reinforcements and come back.
And they should have at least set up that we're going to send reinforcements through to try to contain the situation and limit the amount of death. But you don't really get that. So
Yeah.
I just didn't like how that ended.
It would have
Mhm.
involved either, members of the SGC shooting the Unas or shooting the villagers. There wasn't really going to be a peaceful way to resolve that because Daniel tried,
Mhm.
So I think the ending is actually pretty good because it puts the fate of the planet in basically the people who are invested and who are closest to the situation, which is the villagers themselves and then their
Right.
slaves too. So whatever happens.
I guess it parallels reality where, as we've seen,
Yeah.
the United
Yeah.
States going into small countries and trying to fix things doesn't really work out. So
Yeah. And then you just helicopter out and everybody forgets it ever happened.
yeah.
And you're on to the next episode the next week.
Mm.
Yeah.
Now I'm depressed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We have a very episodic foreign policy in this country.
Yes. I do really like the makeup for the Unas. I thought that looked good.
Yes.
Like with the eyes, like it
Yeah.
it looked realistic and in a good practical way. Like I'm glad they didn't do anything CG and it didn't look cheap.
Yeah. There's that one scene right at the beginning where you see Chaka's hand reach for the energy bar, which is a callback to the first ones.
Mhm.
And you can I don't know if they were sculpted out of resin or what, but his fingernails, they're like translucent and like amber and like chipped and stuff. And they look really cool. And so, just from that one scene, it's like, oh, they put a lot of attention into this costume just by looking at the fingernails that are picking up this energy bar.
Now, according to the wiki, they only had 3 complete set of Unas costumes. So the same 3 actors basically did all the Unases with little changes, basically.
Yeah.
Nice. I feel like that's one of those things that you'd find on those auction sites,
Yeah.
like where they sell off all the props from a TV show. I want to get a Unas mask.
Yeah. But the mask would probably just be like 4 pieces of latex that covered various, because that foam latex does not hold up very well, and neither does the burlap or whatever, the muslin they make the costumes out of. But yeah, so for only having 3 costumes, I mean, they create the illusion that there's a lot of Unas here. Yeah,
because I could have sworn that there were like at least 7 or 8 in the pin in the beginning.
Well, they could have people using partial costumes and things like that. Like, if you show them like chest up, then all you have to do is have like a shirt. Like you see them where they're wearing kind of the shirt, the slave style shirt, and then the mask, basically. Because that way they don't have the full costume with the hands, with all that kind of stuff.
Right.
Like the one that was walking with the kid.
Yeah.
You didn't see his hand. You just saw his arm go behind the kid's back.
Yeah, another very effective scene. This is after the kid has called him out in the barn, but of course he's being escorted around by a very large Unas. And so you have the non-Chaka who hasn't been enslaved, looking kind of with contempt at, the Unas there who works for the house there, right? So, and that was another parallel to slavery in the South here. In America as well, and it does very chilling because you know that like at any moment these Unas could potentially just rise up and kill whomever they're with, and this one seems to show genuine affection for the kid, but once the rebellion starts, what's going to happen to him is a good question.
Mm-hmm. Just hope that they're able to resolve it peacefully, but who knows?
I doubt it.
And I assume this isn't something that they revisit later on.
Oh, heavens no. I think we see the Unas maybe one
I think there's one more episode
Yeah.
that we have the Unas, but
Yeah.
But other than that, did they show up in like Atlantis or
No.
at all?
No. There's only a handful of like Milky Way galaxy aliens that show up in Atlantis. They mostly do their own thing there.
No, nice. I'm looking forward to that one.
Yeah, it's the first season or two of Atlantis is superb. I mean, the first season is very, very good.
Nice.
The rest of them are good too, but
yeah. I liked the costuming for the villagers too. It kind of had like a Old West kind of vibe. So that, and I assume that was maybe done to invoke kind of a like American South feel, but I'm glad that they also didn't go too on the nose with like parallels. Like I think
everybody's
obviously
speaking in a Southern accent.
Yeah. Like thought it or like bringing in like the religious angle to it.
Yeah.
Because that
like
could
I said,
have been easy to do.
If they made this episode today, the villagers would have been unequivocally every last one of them, evil racists, which, to be fair, they are, but it would have been, more what we would think of as an evil racist, today, rather than having like that more nuanced approach is, here's their perspective. Here's why, they think enslaving the UNAS is right. And then SG-1 would have just been there to like kill as many of them as possible and make their like heads explode and stuff.
Yes, I agree. Because you have the reality of people living in a society where there's injustices going on, but not every single person that's not like their whole focus. Like if you grow up in that kind of situation, you're not going to have another context for it. I think that's a much more interesting thing to explore than just making everybody like a flaming neo-Nazi.
Yeah. So those are the things I liked about it. But again, it was undercut by really the shows itself or the characters not being able to really come to, an agreement on whether or not the UNAS were sentient. They always seem to be surprised that like, oh, these people we thought that it was wrong that they were in, because they don't seem to be against like the slavery, Daniel and Jack, like right away. It's only when they figure out that the UNAS are sentient. But I mean, why wouldn't they be? You spend enough time with Chaka, and granted, these have been like inbred, but that still doesn't, we would still consider them people, right? I mean,
right.
they're still sentient beings. They're still, but so it was kind of like, oh, well, we didn't really care until we learned that these people could talk, type thing. So that part was a little, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, we knew like with Shaka that he had family and everything like that. They talked about how he developed his own little clan and all that. So yeah, that was a little weird. They're just, but they get to the plans. Oh, they're just cattle now. There's although the idea of them being inbred, I think was kind of being used more as an excuse than actually being a problem.
Right. Yeah. I don't think it was an actual thing. Like,
the guy, the one was belligerent and wasn't being trained because he wasn't going to be trained, Yeah. That kind of deal.
Sentient being who did not want to be enslaved.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's another thing that seemed odd about this episode is that, like, especially because Daniel's usually so passionate about like justice for people, and he almost seemed kind of like lackadaisical. Like he cared about Shaka because Shaka was his friend, but he didn't really seem to care about the rest of them. Like, and overall, I feel like just the way the characters acted in this episode was kind of like they weren't interested. I don't know if maybe the cast didn't care for this episode and that bled through in the performances, but they all seemed kind of just going through the motions.
I think Jack was the only one who kind of showed any emotion about it, but not much. Yeah. I agree with that.
We still get some funny Jack and Daniel moments, though, like where they're trying to get the UNAS to move back from the cages so they can free them or whatever, and Jack's like, get them to move back, and like Daniel goes like, move back, and Jack says, well, I could have said that. He's expecting Daniel to say it in UNAS, and for somebody who's like identified 70 words in like UNAS, Daniel seems to know very little of the UNAS language. Like he's still trying to figure out like basic like ko, what does that mean? Oh yeah, that means give. But he already like he knows that he knows 70 of their words, right? So that has to be one of them.
Yeah. Well, but he also knows that Shaka means thank you for trying to free me. Sorry for getting you into this mess.
It means everything.
It means everything, basically.
It's like Cree.
Catch-all.
It's like, is it Hawaiian that has a lot of words that mean like 10 different things?
Could be.
I think so. I'm trying to think. There's some language where it's got a structure where, depending on the context, one word can mean like 10 vastly different things. Yeah. I don't know. Just felt like this episode to me wasn't good enough to be good, and it wasn't bad enough to be fun. It was just kind of meh.
It was there. It was okay.
Yeah. There's like I said, there's a lot I like about it, but it didn't. There was some things that they needed to fix before it could really click. And
now the set should look familiar because it was the same set they used for 100 Days. Another stellar episode.
Oh,
yeah,
nice.
Maybe that's why Jack was in such a hurry to get out of there.
Oh, yeah.
True.
maybe my girlfriend and baby are here, and I want to get out of here before they catch me.
Yeah. They hook up with Mayborn and his crew as quick as I can.
Yeah.
Awesome. So do we have any fun alternate titles for this episode, Victor?
Yes.
There's a bunch of good ones, actually. This has got...
Yes, Jack, there are, in fact, many fun titles for this. There's the French, which is masters and servants, or I'll just say maîtres and serviteurs. And then Hungarian, we have slavery, which is like rabszolgaság is slavery in Hungarian. Domestic animals in Czech, I'm not even going to attempt that one, but in German, the name of the episode is simply Chaka. Yeah, so they weren't going to like go into the whole concept of like slavery and Untermenschen and stuff. They were just...
I wonder if their laws about how that stuff is talked about there affected the titling of this episode.
I think that those were probably like a lot more like present in probably the 90s and early 2000s than they are today.
Now, I'd be surprised if slavery was one of those that it was such a concern.
Yeah.
But this is going back to the German, let's be completely literal with our title.
Yeah.
True,
So
yeah.
I can't get much more literal than saying Shaka.
Chaka's in it.
Shaka's in it. You know?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I remember, when obviously they were taking the Nazi insignias off all the uniforms in the Indiana Jones movies in Germany and stuff. And then at some point in like the Indiana Jones video games, they stopped calling them Nazis and just started calling them Germans. So like Indiana Jones would be like, "Oh no, the Germans are here. Let's shoot all the Germans." And stuff. And I was like,
worse.
I know. It's like, I know you're trying to be sensitive and stuff, but now you're just like, you want to wipe out like an entire country of people who still exist. But yeah.
That has the opposite of the intended effect.
Yeah. I don't know if they're still doing that or not, but yeah. It was, I was like, that's horrible, Indiana Jones. Don't say that.
I know any conversation about Nazis in Germany is you got to be very careful about how you're talking about them. Not because they're supporting them, but on the opposite side, anything that even hints that you might be supporting Nazism in any way is immediately verboten.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, as they say in Germany.
Yes,
they do.
Yeah, but yeah, so definitely some interesting titles there. Episode could have been more interesting, but there's the ending. I think is probably, and then the scene with the kid are the two most interesting parts. You're like, that could go very badly for them at the end. But it's not as visceral a gut punch as the other side where. That's the one what we talked about earlier with Renee Auberjonois as the guest star. But I wouldn't put it in the in the bottom 10, but I wouldn't put it in the top 25.
Yeah, it's very middling.
Yeah.
Awesome. Did you have any other thoughts on this episode, Father?
Nope.
All right. Before we go, we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create The Secret to Stargate, including Aaron M., John S., Joseph S., Adam L., and some guy named Victor L. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue The Secret to Stargate and all the shows at StarQuest. You can join them by visiting...
You're welcome, by the way. I'm a Patreon. You're welcome for the show, and you should become a Patreon too, dear listener.
Yes.
Yes, 100%. And also thank you to Victor for doing all the editing on these episodes.
Oh,
it is fantastic. To find previous episodes of Secret to Stargate and to send feedback, please visit sqpn.com/Stargate, and you can email us at stargate@sqpn.com or follow StarQuest on social media at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia or on Twitter at SQPN. And we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next episode of SG-1, The Tomb. Until then, Father Cory, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Stargate.
Thank you, Jack.
And Victor Lambs, thank you too.
Thanks, Jack, and Wakta Ko Aka Nake Ka.
Amen.
Chock full of nuts.
Yeah.
Timba, his arms wide. And once again, I'm Jack Baruzzini. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Stargate on StarQuest.
Anyway, I'm sorry, but that just happens to be how I feel about it. What do you think?
Oh, man.
Yeah. I'll put that at the
needs
end of
to
the
stay
episode. Yeah.
She is too fat to sit on a small stack of books. She just took a
yeah.
dive off the side of the desk.
I can relate.